turning point in your life by making a simple decision.
Fundamental questions of navigation. Where am I? Where am I going? And how do I get there from here?
I invite the leaders of our planet to ask themselves these three questions before they make any crucial decisions.
But if you don't make decisions, you're going to stay right where you are.
We are all map makers.
We are in a time of transition.
If we're going to change, we have to change the direction that we're going.
Our planet needs leaders who know where they want to go.
When we change the direction we're going, then we want to make sure we're going in the right direction.
Leaders who can see the big picture.
Because if we're not, we're going to either go backwards or we're going to stay where we are.
Recognizing the psychological and the spiritual shifts and changes that need to be made, often from the inside to the outside.
To be able to shape your future, you have to be willing and able to change your paradigm.
Complex journeys require navigation. The path to the truth is one such journey. This is your GPS. Hairstyling services provided by J.D. Edwards Salon and Spa, Palmdale Shopping Plaza, Madera Street. Accessories provided by Chevette Williamson Jewelry. Standout jewelry for standout women. And what sovereignty really looks like for small island states. Is it really possible to have sovereignty, true freedom and independence in a small state? Because we look at the history of Russia and Ukraine. Matter of fact, I prepared a couple of clips to help you to understand how we got to this place where we are today. As it relates to Russia and Ukraine. And then I want us to consider our own vulnerabilities as a small state. So let's begin the show before I bring on my guests. Let's begin the show with clip number 1, talking about the hidden history or the conflict that has been hidden in history as it relates to Russia and the Ukraine.
We begin in the 9th century. There was a state called Kievan Rus. This is where it was located. The Slavic people lived here. The city of Kiev was their capital. Between 980 and 1015, the Kievan Rus was ruled by Grand Prince Volodymyr. In Russian, his name is Vladimir. In Ukrainian, Volodymyr. And as fate would have it, these are also the names of the presidents of these two countries today. Anyway, Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians draw their lineage from this Slavic state. A lot changed in the centuries that followed, and for a lot of it, Ukraine was under Russian rule. In the 1900s, the two were Soviet republics, Russia the most powerful of the 15 republics, and Ukraine the second most powerful. It had defense industries, large agricultural lands, and housed much of the Soviet nuclear arsenal. During the Cold War, Ukraine was the arch rival of the United States. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Ukraine became independent, as did Russia. Ukraine inherited much of Soviet nuclear arsenal, but gave it up to Russia in 1994. In exchange, Moscow guaranteed Ukraine's security and promised to respect its sovereignty. They signed the Budapest Memorandum along with these countries. Cut to November 2013, Viktor Yanukovych was the president of Ukraine. He had a reputation for heavy-handedness, corruption, and above all, for being openly pro-Moscow. In 2013, he rejected an EU trade deal. This deal could have meant greater integration with the European Union. Instead, Yanukovych decided to take a $15 billion bailout from Russia. To many Ukrainians, it felt like being sold to Moscow, so protests broke out. They were called Euromaidan. Euro because these protests were about Europe, and Maidan because they happened in Kiev's Maidan, what we today know as the Independence Square. Here, protesters chanted, "Sign the EU deal, Yanukovych must step down." Russia supported the president, the West supported the protesters. In February 2014, Yanukovych's government was toppled, the president was driven out of Ukraine, he fled to Russia. Not every Ukrainian was happy with this. Many in the Russian-speaking East wanted Yanukovych to stay. When he was driven out, the minority felt disenfranchised. On the other side of the border, Russia was angry it had lost its puppet. To salvage the situation, Moscow annexed Crimea. Why Crimea? Well, let's now zoom into this part of the world. Crimea is a peninsula. It is located in the Black Sea. In 1954, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev transferred Crimea. It was given to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic from the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic. Why? Khrushchev hoped the transfer would strengthen, quote-unquote, brotherly ties between the Ukrainian and Russian people. Both Russia and Crimea were part of the Soviet Union, so this transfer did not mean very much. When Ukraine became independent in 1991, Crimea joined it. The peninsula was given special autonomy. It remained home to Russian military bases. Moscow promised to respect Crimean autonomy. Many in Russia were of the opinion that Crimea should not have been allowed to join Ukraine. In 2014, when Yanukovych was ousted from power in Ukraine, Russian military began seizing government buildings in Crimea. Soon the entire peninsula was under military occupation. A referendum followed. On the 16th of March 2014, Crimeans voted to become a part of Russia. Was this vote legitimate? Well, it depends on who you ask. For Putin, this was Crimea's liberation. For the rest of the world, this was Crimea's annexation. The focus then shifted to eastern Ukraine, where Russia-backed separatists had seized territory. Ukrainian forces did not launch an all-out offensive at first, but on the 17th of July 2014, when a flight carrying 298 people was shot down by these rebels, Ukrainian forces decided to flush out the rebels. The separatists began losing ground, so the Russian army stepped in. They invaded eastern Ukraine and fought alongside the rebels. What followed was a series of talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the West. They resulted in the Minsk Accords. This was first signed in 2014. Both sides agreed on ceasefire and military withdrawal. Ukraine agreed to hold elections in the rebel-held areas. 8 years on, the Minsk Accords remain unimplemented.
So I want you to, as you're listening to these reports, I know you're saying, that's on the other side of the world. What does that really have to do with us? But as you'll hear in the conversation that's going to develop in a few moments when I bring my guests into the studio, you will find that there are many, many similarities that we should be concerned about as a small state. Because again, the question is, what is the price of sovereignty? We here in the Bahamas, we say that we are an independent sovereign nation. But what does that really mean? And are we truly an independent sovereign nation? Before I bring in the guests, I want to go to my next clip. And this clip, again, looking at the situation in Russia and Ukraine, is going to explain to you what it is that Russia wants, or what does Putin want out of this conflict?
Ukraine stands as the largest European country excluding Russia. It covers an area of more than 600,000 square kilometers with a population of 44 million and a GDP of more than $155 billion. Per capita income, more than $3,700. Today, Ukraine is divided between East and West in more ways than one. The West sees itself as more European. The East is closer to Russia, be it in terms of geography or sentiment. In the West, most Ukrainians speak Ukrainian. In the East, a third are native Russians. In the West, Russia is looked at with suspicion. In the East, Russia is looked at through the lens of shared history and heritage. Ukraine also remains at war. Its forces are fighting the rebels in the east. Rebel leaders are ruling at least two regions, Donetsk and Luhansk. Together, they're known as the Donbas region. What does Vladimir Putin want? For NATO to stop expanding. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's a military alliance. These countries are the founding members of NATO. These countries joined it during the Cold War, and these countries joined after it. Ukraine wants to join NATO too, but Putin wants NATO to exclude Ukraine and every former Soviet state. And this is just half the story. Like I said, a lot is hidden in history. For starters, there is domestic politics. When Putin annexed Crimea, his approval rating skyrocketed. Keeping the nationalistic drum rolling helps the Russian president. Annexing parts of Ukraine also helps Putin restore Russia's superpower image. Again, back to history. Many Russians view Ukraine's independence as a mistake. It is true that Ukraine was ruled by Russia. In fact, Ukraine has barely remained independent pre-1991. There was a brief period before World War I, and then another stint in 1600. For the rest of its modern history, Ukraine was under Russia. 1 in 6 Ukrainians is an ethnic Russian. 1 in 3 speaks Russian as a native language. So Putin is right when he says historically they were one. But claiming Ukraine on the basis of colonial history is wrong. It will be like Britain claiming India or South Africa or Spain claiming the Philippines. Past imperialism cannot justify present-day expansionism.
I want y'all to marinate on that last thing she said about past imperialism, because this is where the similarities are especially pronounced when it comes to us here in the Bahamas. We all know that we are a former colony of Great Britain. So what if the Queen woke up tomorrow and she decided we want the Bahamas back? What happens to us then? Does anybody come to our aid? Can we defend ourselves? But this goes so much more broader. It's deeper than even just a matter of self-defense. And in this final clip, and all of my guests are now here, so I'll bring them onto the stage after this final clip. In this final clip, we take a closer look at the whole idea of imperialism and what Russia is trying to enforce upon Ukraine based on their concept of imperialism.
Here's what else history tells us. Ukraine was forcefully Russified. Cut to 1700, Russian leader Catherine the Great started Russifying Ukraine. Ethnic Russians were shipped to this part of the world. Schools were told to teach Russian language. By 1800, the Ukrainian language was banned. In 1930, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin steered a famine in Ukraine. Millions of Eastern Ukrainians were killed. The area was then repopulated with ethnic Russians. In the 1940s, the ethnic Tatars were relocated. They too were replaced with Russians. There is a reason why Eastern Ukraine today has so many native Russian speakers. It was designed to be that way. Eastern Ukraine was always dear to Russia. It has coal, it has iron, fertile land. Its historical connection with Russia was forced. Putin time and again talks about the Holy Rus. He says Russians and Ukrainians are one people. 70% Ukrainians reject this thought. 72% consider Russia a hostile state. Today, 33.3% Ukrainians are ready to take up arms against Russia. 21.7% are ready to stage a civil resistance against Russia. 67% Ukrainians want to join the EU. 59% want to join the NATO. Meet the current Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He came to power in 2019 following a landslide victory.
Hello.
He's a vocal critic of Russia. Zelensky openly opposes Russian occupation of eastern Ukraine. 73% of Ukrainian voters voted this man to power. Today, Volodymyr Zelensky represents the pulse of Ukraine, the Ukraine that wants to remain independent of Russia. But Vladimir Putin wants to become the man who revived Russian imperialism. He does not realize the world has moved on.
All right, so we are back now in the studio. All of my guests are here, and I'm going to call this collective group a group of critical thinkers. Even though only one gentleman on this panel sort of took that as his nickname, critical thinker C. Alan Johnson, but also joining us are Rob Sawyer and Stone McEwan. And gentlemen, welcome to the show. And one of the reasons why, see, Alan, your microphone was muted. There you go. One of the reasons why I brought sort of this group together is because of a post that Stone posted on Facebook. And after reading the comments, I thought, now this group right here would make for a very interesting conversation. Because as we listened to all of that background provided between about the conflict that's now going on between Russia and the Ukraine, we realized that there's a lot of history there, whether you fall on the side of Russia or on the side of Ukraine in this conflict. Rob, I think you may need to remove your earphones. That may be where we're getting that scratching noise from. But no matter where you fall on the side of this conflict, you realize that this is about history, control, and power. Very much, some would argue, the precursor for where we find ourselves in the Bahamas today, because we are prideful in the fact that we're an independent nation since 1973, but yet we have not completely severed ties with Great Britain. And there are many who question why that is the case. Why have we not become a full republic? But when you look at what is happening in Ukraine, you realize that there's quite a bit of vulnerability when it comes to being a sovereign small state. So, looking at what we just learned, looking at what we see going on between Russia and Ukraine, and knowing where we are today, gentlemen, what say you? What is the real price of sovereignty, and are we prepared to pay that price? Anyone?
Well, that's a good question, Michelle. Thank you so much for inviting me to your show. So obviously,
This is Rob. Rob Sawyer speaking, by the way, for our
yes, it
radio
is,
audience.
right. Yes. So obviously, these issues over there is affecting us over here.
Yes.
We have a classic bully situation here. Russia is obviously a bully in their neighborhood. And because they're so large and so rich, and just because they can, they've been able to exert their power and their influence and cross boundaries, whether the other people wanted them to or not. So this is a very legitimate concern. I mean, if we had a bully in our neighborhood, what are we going to do about it? And this is where Ukraine is right now. They have to contend with this bully. And the bully feels justified, as if they have a God-given right to exert this authority.
Because of their history. Yeah.
Because of their history. So how do you contend and argue against, their passions and their perceptions that this is, some godly assignment that they have? It's really quite a pickle for them.
Rob, I want you to go ahead and remove your headphones, please, your earphones, please. I think that's what's giving us that crackling noise.
Can I say, let each one of them mute their mic?
Excuse me, guys. Everything I'm hearing is gargleys. I can't understand anything.
Okay, let's see what happens.
I'm saying to you, Stone, mute your mic and see if the noise goes away.
Hello?
Mute your microphone, Stone. Okay, see, Alan, while we're waiting for him to do that, you go ahead and jump into this conversation, please.
See, now, here's what often happens. Often happens is that we, in this Western Hemisphere, often take a position based on conditioning, media conditioning, as to exactly what's happened. Many of the things that Sawyer said is correct, but there's always a cultural power dynamics that exist anywhere in any region of the world. What we have been having around the world, though, is a power dynamics has been going on, because as the world is moving away from the old ideologies of things, we are moving more now into what is called intangible power. If we talk about digitization of the world, we talk about digitization of power also. And so the only thing that's left in the world fight for now is resources and the new digital universe. Okay, so what Russia is now doing is looking at protecting or expanding it's perceived protectorate. And oftentimes, in spite of what we like to believe, and Bahamas will argue against it, many would argue that we are considered a protectorate of the United States. And we'll come back to that subject when we talk more about sovereignty and this so-called concept of independence, more so from a vehement standpoint. But when you look at the resources, beginning also with geolocation is also one of the world's most powerful resources right now. As you move for an economic, you see China rebuilding the Belt Road, the Silk Road. The United States is trying to establish its dominance in this Western Hemisphere with its trade agreements. There's a major fight going on in the world right now between China, Russia, and the United States for digital supremacy, artificial intelligence supremacy, and data supremacy. And so we can't simply separate any one particular thing and look at the geolocation, look at and separate one singular thing and say this is separate and apart from everything else. And so when you look at Ukraine, Ukraine serves a fiscal, from a global economic standpoint, a gateway to many of the things they're fighting for. So for Russia and this whole influence of NATO, because when NATO comes in, Russia has nothing more than veto power from an economic console, because most of the ideology, if not is of this democratic democracy type environment, dominates the Security Council of the United Nations. And so we have an argument that that communism, as we like to think of it, Marxism, communism, socialism, whatever, is becoming a weakening force from a global influence type environment. So Russia now sees an opportunity in this new flip of how global business is done to influence. And this is why Putin has been able to stay on so long, because there is a control dynamic, an economic that's in this picture. And so I understand the media aspect of saying Ukraine wants independence. And believe it or not, NATO wants that what NATO wants for them is equivalent to what Putin wants. NATO wants the same geolocation, the same level of influence, the same level of dependency that Russia wants. Why else can you explain, in spite of the so-called soft invasion, the way Putin describes it, that you would have a collaboration of countries who actually carries a tremendous amount of stake? It's a small subset of countries that influences what is happening in response to what he's doing, including the financial system, the economic system, the blockade, and everything else. Because we only need to look and see what's happening with other countries around the world from when they exited Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Iran, all these different things. Nothing is in isolation. Everything is integrated. So when we look at this as a broader picture, and we'll come back to this so-called independence and sovereignty, you'll see now that the world has created, we could say the world is flat again, that there is no borders in the world anymore, except for economic control of borders.
Let's get Rob in here. Let's get Rob in here, Cialan. I see where Stone's camera is off, so I'm not sure what's happening with him. Rob, how do you respond to what Cialan is saying?
Well, that's a nice summation of geopolitical situation, over there, and in a lot of ways it applies to us, over here as well. I mean, you had asked that question, you had made a statement about being a protectorate, and we are a protectorate, but not because of the British putting us in this position. We have voluntarily signed treaties and accords with the United States as part of the Caribbean Basin Security Pact. So yes, we are submitting to Pax Americana, to the peace domain as the United States is enforcing in this hemisphere. So we are not being bullied in this case. We are voluntarily submitting to this arrangement. Ukraine is in a very different situation than we are. Their bully, Russia, has nuclear armament. Ukraine does not. We do not have nuclear armament. We don't have to worry about it because our security partner, the United States, has the nuclear armament in order to defend the whole region. So there's some a lot of truth to what Mr. Johnson says, but there's some practicality and actuality that's different for us. We are here voluntarily.
Is that a good position to be in, albeit voluntarily, though? Should we be concerned when we look at what is happening, even though their circumstances are not exactly as ours are? Should we be concerned about whether or not we truly have comfort in the sovereignty that we claim to have? Could it be where we are vulnerable to the point where anybody could wake up tomorrow and decide that they are going to be a bully, and we're going to find ourselves in a problem?
I'll put to you that we have already capitulated, okay? And we have never in that capitulation or that surrender made any type of strategic demand or strategic positioning in our exact location. You can see this very easily when the new president comes in. He calls Mexico, he calls China, he calls Canada. He doesn't call us, if you want to say, the closest third border to him, because he considers a non-existent entity. And
well, he does call
CARICOM, location that's responsible for 80% of the.
Johnson, he does call CARICOM.
Right, yeah.
It's a regional construct that we're a part of, so he's not exactly ignoring us.
Yeah, but I've talked to people from the Foreign Service in the United States, and I'm concerned that very position I take, because when you look at you saying like he calls a trade agreement or a collective bloc as opposed to an individual country that serves thing. Mexico and Canada are also part of collective blocs, but he speaks to them directly as from a leadership perspective, even just saying hi. And so I'm simply saying is that the Bahamas has always had a strong strategic position. The problem is that we have never taken opportunity to recognize it. And this is why we are not just a protectorate, but we actually are a dependent, because we have created an economy that actually depends on the United States. We have an actual economic system. We have a food system. We have so many different things that we have basically tied into. I know we talk about this concept of food security and food sovereignty. We can't even define what the difference between the two, are, and try to have a conversation with the political class, because we have no real foreign service. I've heard it talk about for the almost 20 years that I've been home, about establishing a foreign service type environment where we have individuals that understand these geopolitical type environment, where we even send students on, where we establish a University of the Bahamas, where we have these discussions and studies. But we basically just simply live day by day. We're almost like the work class, where you get up today, go to work, hopefully nothing bad happens, and we'll see about doing it again tomorrow.
You used the word dependence. I would think there's a different word we can use that better describes our relationship with the United States. How about parasite? Ooh. They're the hosts. They get a cold, we sneeze.
Yep. We're symbiotically connected, so whatever's in their blood is in ours.
Yeah, but we're not condemned to that eventuality only. Rather than a parasite, we could be a protege. There are a lot of things in the American ecosystem that we could model, emulate, and do better. Actually, do better than a lot of things that the Americans do. So we have the opportunity to exert ourselves above and beyond the formulation that we're currently following.
And I would agree with him. Just Michelle, let me say I'd agree with him, because we are now in a global economic reset. Almost the whole world has been reset to zero, economically, socially, everything else. And so the mere fact that even in the 2 years that we've been down, we keep waiting and saying, if America would just open its back door and some people could sneak out towards us, we can eat, as opposed to trying to formulate an actual growth strategy in this whole new reshaping of the world. Ukraine, Russia, China type environment. Just watch the chess pieces on the table, and then understand that what happens there has direct influence on the hegemony or something that the United States has set up of power and control in this region. And so you can see that happening, where the mere fact that Russia sends 2 nuclear bombers to Venezuela to to show that he has the ability to intrude within their so-called territorial presumption of ownership. And so look at what America's been doing in South America to sever that, because they know that Russia's always had an indirect support of certain regimes in South America that the CIA and others has been working for decades to usurp and undermine and change. And so nothing is in isolation. The problem is that we as behemoths, we use this always thing, we are a small nation. And I tell them all the time, so a mosquito is small. Try put a mosquito in a room with one and see the influence you have. So we have the ability to influence and to become a player. Look at Qatar. Qatar is relatively, with us, Qatar is a political genius or major player in a massive way, and if size is relative. But what we have is we've had leadership that is tied into this mindset of colonialism. That's why I say if in this condition, if UK come back and the United States doesn't push back, we'll actually insist and build a new not government house, a Queen's place just for her. Because
all right, we have to take a break, C. Allen. We have to take a break. Let's take this break. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation. We're talking really about the price of sovereignty. How expensive is it truly to be a sovereign and independent state, particularly if you are a small state? Now, I like what C. Allen said a moment ago in terms of comparing the mosquito. Did you know that the mosquito is the #1 killing agent in the world? Mosquitoes kill more people even than humans.
Did you know that a mosquito only has a half-life of about 2
How
weeks?
does that relate to a small state? We're going to talk more about it on the other side of the break. Stay with us. This is GPS on Global 99.5 FM.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, can you
Understanding your microbiome, also known as your gut ecosystem, can change everything you thought you knew about nutrition, digestion, immunity, and metabolism. Keeping your gut ecosystem healthy and balanced is essential. Ultimate Microbiome by Youngevity was specifically formulated to optimize this ecosystem. It provides the advanced support your gut needs through prebiotic, probiotic, and postbiotic supplementation. Our unique blend of probiotics includes Lactobacillus and Plantarum, healthy bacteria that can help prevent harmful bacteria from taking over your gut. Increasing your gut's population of beneficial bacteria creates a more balanced gut microbiome, which has been shown to aid in weight loss, skin health, sleep, mood, and may even help with seasonal allergies. Ultimate Microbiome also promotes the production of postbiotics. Postbiotics are key to help regulate your gastrointestinal health. To enhance digestion, Digizyme Multi-Enzyme Complex, a blend of 5 specific enzymes, has been added to Ultimate Microbiome. It can help break down food so your body can better absorb nutrients. Plus, we've added our proprietary I-26 hyperimmune egg powder to aid in the elimination of disease-causing gut bacteria and help your body balance its immune response. Ultimate Microbiome, the scientific, proprietary, and holistic approach to gut health that helps optimize your body's entire gut ecosystem. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for a rim fix and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Tracklight, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires. Cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Glasses loud.
To stay healthy, it's crucial to make sure you get the nutrition you need every day. But it's difficult to get all your recommended vitamins and minerals from food alone. Even in the United States, 94% of people are deficient in at least one nutrient. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 by Youngevity is a simple, convenient, and affordable way to help your body get the essential nutrients it needs. It's an advanced plant-driven multivitamin mineral complex that contains certified organic whole foods, trace minerals, and antioxidants. BTT 2.0 supports your body's natural defense system with a proprietary blend of energy-boosting and body-loving nutrients, plus prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and enzymes that support digestion. With an unusually high ORAC score of 8,000, you get even more antioxidants to help combat free radicals that can cause damage to your cells. But to get the most benefit and value from any multivitamin, your body must be able to break down the nutrients so you can fully absorb them. Otherwise, they'll just pass through your system without doing any good. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 was specially formulated with synergizing cofactors to ensure you get maximum nutrient absorption. Beyond Tangy Tangerine 2.0 is the easiest way to give your body the balance and complete daily vitamin mineral supplement it needs for optimal support of your overall health. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
This portion of GPS is brought to you by Tiki Bikini Hut at Junkanoo Beach. Great food, cool tropical drinks, and family fun in the sun.
And welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm in your company today, and we are talking to, at this moment, C. Alan Johnson and Rob Lowe. We're talking about, did I just call you Rob Lowe? Robb Sawyer. Why I got Rob Lowe on my brain? Okay, I don't know where I came. Robb Sawyer.
I've been called Tom Sawyer all my life. Now this time Rob Lowe. I have to get used to the misappropriation.
My apologies. I don't know where it came from. But anyway, we're talking to these fine gentlemen today about the price of sovereignty when we look at what is happening in the Ukraine with the Russian aggression and the vulnerability of Ukraine. And we have to consider how this relates to us, not just in terms of the obvious, because we all know that, the world is going to already is feeling the impact of this as far as the economy is concerned. The price of gasoline is going to go skyrocket, but apart from that, the vulnerability of small states, particularly those that truly aren't able to defend themselves against the bigger boys. And this is where we find ourselves in the Bahamas, like it or not. Yes, we are a peaceful nation. Yes, we have our neighbor to the north that we would like to consider as our big brother, per se, who will come to our aid of defense if need be. And we are also a former British colony, so we're hoping that with those ties that Britain would come to our aid. But what if Great Britain or the U.S. decided to be the big bad boy in our situation? What then? How would the Bahamas be able to survive? And what are the realities that we face, considering that we will never be able to defend ourselves against the larger nations that have, more firepower behind them? So where does that place us as a small state? And what do we need to do to protect ourselves even more than we are at this time as it relates to these vulnerabilities?
It's interesting what you said there, Ms. Malcolm. You described the United States and you said, what if they were a bad actor? That's not so theoretical. Just 2 years ago, they assumed the role of a bad actor.
Okay, please break that down for us.
Yeah, with the pandemic, when COVID-19 came about and we didn't know what we didn't know, and we were all trying to protect ourselves. Our government had ordered some PPPs, personal protection equipment, and we bought it from the United States. They were on a ship on the way here to the Bahamas. The federal government at that time sent out the Coast Guard to grab the ships, bring it back to Florida, take the goods off, and refuse to allow us to have it because they needed it for themselves.
Yes.
How's that for bullying? These are the big brothers that we look up to. But blood is thicker than water. They were trying to protect their people above and beyond what the foreign entities and trading partners needed. So, yes, it's not so theoretical to think that someday the U.S. could be the bad actor in relation to us. They have done this. Right.
See, Alan, your thoughts?
Yeah, that shows us right then and there that if that was an awakening call, because not only that, now remember, the Prime Minister went the next day and made possessions of those things illegal, just to show you how afraid he was in that response. And so it shows you that we have these small influences almost on a daily basis coming from the United States, and it basically comes from our bigger status. We have never sought to build capacity on who we are and what our capability are, and the dependence of the global economy on the Bahamas as a whole. A lot of Bahamians seem to be oblivious to the fact that 3 plus trillion of trade occurs in the Bahamas every single year. That's not part of our GDP. That's $3 trillion. That's not my figures. That is WTO figures. And so it tells us that when you look, and that's the Bahamas exclusive economic zone and territorial waters alone. That doesn't include the other accumulation of anything. So that tells you the potential of our influence in America. But America itself treats us like the bigger nation that our leadership presents itself. This is why they bring token rewards to us. Here's some bulletproof vests. Here's one dinghy that you could do. Here's whatever else. When if they were to take sincerely or seriously the third border prospect of what the services the Bahamas provide, they'll probably spend billions of dollars. But they could get us with $50,000 donation, $200,000 donation, do whatever else. And so when you look at the use of our country, the use of our resources and manpower to basically patrol, we always hear the argument, well, they're only passing through the Bahamas to the US. What if that was truly conceptualized? You'll see to understand the threat there is. The United States comes to the Bahamas and says, we're giving you a pre-clearance to help your economy. The last thing the United States wants is a bastard economy, such as a few in south of us, to be on as their part of their third borders with the inability to subdue or slow down incursions into their territorial waters. Let's go back to this so-called thing that we always praise. If the United States get mad with us, they'll take out our pre-clearance. Garbage.
They did.
What pre-clearance is, no, that's what I'm saying. No,
it's gone.
No, right, no.
Hasn't
no,
changed the
that's
relationship at all.
No, that's what I'm saying to you. That's an illusion of. See, it's like, it's like you took out pre-clearance from a burning down house. How do you take something out that you wasn't there? If we actually look at the larger picture of the geopolitical fight that is going on, some positioning that the Progressive Liberal Party has taken towards China, I'm not going to mention it here on air, but there's also some real estate push and shove that's going on that the Bahamas government has to influence, and some people within the Progressive Liberal Party that doesn't see an issue with having a stronger, better, more vibrant relationship with China. So it isn't like, oh, they're doing anything else. But if you want to go back to that, the problem is that United States, we serve as a pre-clearance. No, the word is we serve as a pre-screening for the United States. And so in essence, we basically act as a breaker towards a swarm of people or individuals who would enter the United States. Yeah, they would stop the Americans from coming here. Okay, good. Now we invaded from the south. So now who will stop in the middle of the night the voluminous number of things that we have comes from the south towards us from one particular nation, increase that by tenfold going into the United States. And the mere fact that the United States immigration law allows you, say, a person goes to the United States and apply for amnesty, and they deny. Okay, they put them on they leave. Guess what? They can go back the next day and do it again and again and again. And so in the same manner, the same way they have to spend the billions of dollars in creating this artificial wall to the south of them for Mexico, is the same type of environment that becomes even harder for them to so-called in the Bahamas.
Yeah, see, I want to see if you're having some internet connection issues.
Right. And I'm just saying, and countries like China, the day the United States move out, that a new pimp will show up in town and take us, the girl on the street, under their arms and says, don't worry about the way the old Cadillac guy treats you. We got a new Hummer we can put you in. We can treat you much better. But you just keep doing what you should do for them. So and this tells you the power of where we are geopolitically if we look at a wider spectrum of how the world is changing. Let me just end and say this. We also serve, the Bahamas and people heard me say this for almost 2 decades, is a huge player in this new data, digital sovereignty battle that's going on. The problem is that we see it as an intangible, so we don't really get to really have discussion from an intellectual level across the Bahamas and the diaspora, which the University of Bahamas should be leading, we don't get to have that type of conversation.
Okay, I see Stone is back on the stream. Stone, can you hear us okay now?
It is still the same way. I'm hearing like a lot of goggly stuff. Can't understand anything.
Okay, I think
So
it's a device situation for you.
Speak to me again, Michelle.
Well, yeah, no, I was asking if you could hear us okay.
Nice. It's
It-
all
it's
goggly.
Okay, so I think it's an issue with your.
I will just jump in on Facebook and make some comments.
All right, sorry about that, Stone. Okay, so unfortunately, Stone is having some technical difficulties and won't be able to join us on the conversation. Now, I saw while you were saying those things, your last statement, Cialan, that Rob was shaking his head. So I have a feeling he may not be in complete
Something you
agreement.
cannot see on radio, huh?
Yeah, but thank God for StreamYard and Facebook.
I am terribly sorry you have a radio audience. I mean, I groomed myself to look really beautiful for radio today and everything. You guys can't even see it. I'm shaking my head. Yeah. I mean, I had never met Mr. Johnson before, and he seems like quite a character to spend time with. Wow. You ask him one question, and he just sets off, and he's gone for another 20, 25 minutes. You got to catch your breath a couple of times. So I absolutely appreciate you. But if I like to try and keep our discussion as close to this Russia-Ukraine actuality as much as possible, because there's a huge bearing, for us, on this. Yes, we're not exactly Ukraine in that we don't have the same resources that are being, we're being looked at by a bully next door, and he wants to make sure that he stays with us, that we stay with them, and no one else steps in. But Mr. Johnson used an analogy there of a pimp, thereby describing like a beautiful woman who have suitors. And even though we're a small country with small resources, we do have suitors. The United States is a suitor. And what a lot of beautiful women do is when their suitor is not treating them right, they quite often entertain other suitors. So yeah, we have that opportunity. China has exerted some influence in our region, with their trade stance. And so the more and more we do with China, sometimes it makes the U.S. feel a little uncomfortable. And that's something that we should continue to exploit. When one suitor treats us in a disrespectful way, be prepared to listen and pay more attention to the other suitor.
So the thing with that is, though, Rob, that, as a woman, I can tell you that some men have sugar on their tongue. That don't mean, though, that you should trust everything that they come to you with or offer to you.
Or what they do.
Because there's always some ulterior motive there. So do we as a nation being courted in this manner need to be concerned about those who may or may not have sugar on their tongue?
We should always be concerned. We should always look after our needs. We want to hear everybody's words. I mean, China comes at us. I'm sure they don't present themselves as being this champion of human rights, because we know what their record is when it comes to human rights. So we're looking to them for trade. We're looking to them for capital. We're looking to them for intellectual resources. But we're not looking to them to be a leader in terms of how to deal with human rights and civil rights with the minority community. We know better than that. So yes, like a beautiful woman looking at every suitor, we want her look, judge, pick, choose, and refuse what the suitors are bringing towards us.
So one of my Facebook viewers, Bertha, is asking the question, so are we up for grabs?
We had better be.
No.
We better not just take any and everything that comes, we had better pick, choose, and refuse.
But this is why, if we had an actual real strategy of who we want to be, then we could actually know the needs that we need to make the demand. And so, like you say, if you sit, any trinket they bring to you looks good, even if it doesn't have a use. It's almost like, it's almost like you're a beautiful woman with no legs, but I bring you some pretty shoes and you celebrate the shoes. Look how beautiful it is. And you said, but what purpose does it have? And does it fit my purpose or does it fit yours? And so if we actually know what our needs are, then we could be in a position to make demands on any nation, no matter how small the suitor. A small nation like Dubai, when we look at, not small in economics, but I'm saying in the geopolitical push. But when they come, we could say, here's my list. feel free to impress me from this list. And it's the same thing with the United States and China.
Again, you mentioned Qatar earlier, and now you mentioned Dubai. Wow, Mr. Johnson, it looks like you really admire these Arab states in terms of how they've exerted themselves in the world scene, despite being a small caliber. It's unfortunate.
Yes, I do.
We do not have the same disposition on the world scene. We don't have the natural resources that they do.
I would disagree.
Okay.
On the natural resources, we can come to that.
All right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
I'm just thinking of what's happening to the oil prices right now because of the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. Someone reported that it may be looking at $7, within days at the pump here for us. That whole what's happening to oil prices, we're not in that equation in terms of dictating because we're not an oil producing nation. So Qatar, Dubai, they are oil producing nations. So they have a seat at the table. We only on the menu. That's it.
Yeah. No, because that's what I'm saying to you. We go to the table as menu. When we get invited to the table, we don't know that we are the meal. The problem is that I say to you that even in the oil producing nations, that's what I'm saying to you. Oil itself is being diminished. We have some valued assets. Number one being that's very simple, the very single oil thing. The very people who consume the oil needs us as a passageway, as a gateway to the trillions of dollars of oil and things that happens through it. What I'm simply saying is we have taken the passive position as man in the middle, and I use the expression to our open air and our open sea, is we just throw our legs open and saying, pass on through it. I'm simply saying is that we can put ourselves, because the intellectual power of the so-called economic balance, your product has no value, right, sitting in your warehouse unless you actually have a connection to the consumer, say like Super Value. And so we are simply saying that we are just an open market. I'm saying is we can look at the small things, and the small things when added together, looking at it plays a role. And two of our resources is our air and our space. And we could discuss many of this, not a resource show, but there's a lot of resources that is on the table from going back. These are not my ideas. These are public records. I'm simply saying is we don't have discussions on them. We love to discuss what happened yesterday, the accident, the road, who stole $50, who might have misappropriated something, who found a friend's lover, financier, got some contract. We never discuss the big picture of who we are or who we should be.
Okay, so good conversation makes for disagreement sometimes. And so C. Allen and Rob don't see eye to eye on some issues. And one of my Facebook viewers doesn't agree with any of them. She actually says, that her name is Celeste. She says, I don't agree with any of these guys. And now I would like Celeste to either say more on Facebook what she disagrees with or give us a call. And speaking of which, the telephone numbers to call are 326-0271, 326-0271, or 326-0272, 326-0272. And the WhatsApp number, 824-9952, 824-9952. So we have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to GPS. Hello, caller.
Yes, ma'am. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Okay, very good. My name is Kareem Hancho.
Hi.
And I was tuning in. I see a female now in this time slot that their body was. And I see they were talking about the Russian and Ukraine conflict. Now, as a young man, I ran in the last election as the independent candidate. Mm-hmm. And what I recognize now is in my studies, I'm starting to see that places in the world are taking salt water and making it into fuel. There are cars now that are running on salt water, outside of hydrogen fuel engine cars, hybrid cars that are driven with electric. Mm-hmm. We're talking about cars and technology are replacing the fossil fuel. And that is what I feel we as a country need to start to dive into. Mm-hmm. When we talk about global warming, climate change, how is the rise in salt water going to impact us in our country, and can we consume sufficient salt water based from drinking, making it drinkable, to export the world to sell, to buy, and also use it as fuel. So we can now have green, start to move in a green atmosphere, improve our carbon credits, so we can start to make more money in our carbon credits, so we can now release ourselves of being dependent on fossil fuels, because this summer we're going to have the worst record blackouts that we've ever recorded due to our surge in fuel charges. Okay? And so I want all our smart men who are there now, like C. Alan Johnson, who knows me, Robb Sawyer, who knows me, and even Mark Stone, or whatever his name is. They're all young men of age who, as the person said, has not yet provided solutions to problems, that we have resources that we can use to empower our people and the world. So I hope that I am able to impregnate you with a vision from a young man that is fighting for the empowerment of his country and not want to get into which device is better when we know that there's salt water that we can drink, that we have, and that there's salt water that we can use as fuel. Thank you.
Any embrace of alternative energy should be greatly welcomed here. We absolutely have an abundance of resources in terms of solar, in terms of wind, in terms of tidal. We should fully embrace that. It may take some research and development, but it should be encouraged.
There is so much more that we could be doing. We continue to rely on the things that served us during our Parents' Day. I don't know if it's intentionally ignoring what we need to be doing to move to the next level of our development. We cannot continue to, the way the Bible puts it, put old wine into new wineskins. But we seem to have a reluctance on the part of those that we continuously put into power to govern our nation to truly embrace all of the new technologies that are available to us. I mean, case in point, we had to be forced, thanks to COVID, to go from putting things on paper to digitizing just the records in our government agencies. They had to be forced to do that. There was so much resistance to just that.
And we've yet to do that. A lot of people, let's point on that. A lot of people, and I was one of those for years that advocated the same, a lot of people didn't believe that when I said that we had zero existence. It wasn't until I think the IDB report or another international report says that 99.5% of all businesses in the Bahamas, including government, had yet to adopt off-the-shelf technology. So, sorry, let me correct that, because a noted economist told me I was wrong on this. It didn't say 99.5%. It said only 0.5% of businesses had adopted it. So I guess it didn't mean that 99.5 hadn't. For me, it meant that 99.5 happened. So the fact that that 99.5%, and we have went back as COVID has moved away to move away. So let's talk about solar energy. Solar energy is one of those disruptive technologies. The Bahamas has 1,600% the radiant heat that Germany has. And Germany just made a new announcement that the volume of the electricity they generate, that they want to go from 2050 to 2035, 100% green energy. We have 16% of the radiant heat that's necessary to generate solar. But the problem that is when we talk about solar, the fact that we could replace solar in the Bahamas from our bigger status by just simply asking for less than $500 million worth of solar cell to generate electricity for the Bahamas. But here's what happens, and this is where we talk about independence and sovereignty, is that we are a carbon credit tax jurisdiction. We depend on taxing carbon for our very existence while screaming that carbon is killing us. And so when, like Kareem said, okay, yes, salt water, don't worry, in about 15, 20 years, we could be almost 80, 90% covered by salt water. So we can't drink the ocean away. However, we have billions of tons of aragonite that we can consider beginning to shore up our environment.
Okay, I want to bring in a comment from a Facebook viewer. Celeste has responded. Celeste is a person who disagreed with you both. And Celeste says, I feel we should depend on ourselves as a Bahamian nation. Why depend on others when we can independently on our resources? She says we can independently rely on our resources as a Bahamian nation. We have enough resources. That's why we should, I guess she meant to say we should not depend on others. Is that a realistic stand today, considering the vulnerabilities that we face, even just the mere size of our country? is that a realistic position to take? I don't want you to
Mike?
answer the question because it's 3:00. We have to take a break.
Okay. I'll answer
Let's stick a pin in it, and then on the other side of the break, I'll let you both give your views on her comments. So stay with us, everyone. This is GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. We're talking about the real price of sovereignty. We see that Ukraine is paying a dear price right now. What does that say for us here in the Bahamas? Do we need to be concerned about shoring up our ability to be able to defend ourselves at all levels? Stay with us. We'll have more after these words from our sponsors.
Your body's immune system is under constant pressure from things like stress, lack of exercise, and toxins in the environment. It's crucial to be proactive and support your immune system with the nutrients it needs to function effectively. But it's often hard to get these nutrients from food alone. Introducing fast-acting Zinc Plus Immune Support by Longevity. Unlike zinc-only supplements, Zinc Plus Immune Support builds on the proven power of zinc and adds complementary nutrients to give your immune system extra support. Vitamin D helps balance the effects of zinc, while our proprietary blend of natural fruit and root extracts provides the extra help your immune system needs to work against daily stressors. And we've included Longevity's exclusive plant-derived minerals to give your body the minerals it needs but can't get from food alone. And because Zinc Plus Immune Support is delivered in a great-tasting sugar-free berry-flavored lozenge, it encourages quicker absorption of all these nutrients into your body. Zinc Plus Immune Support. Zinc plus the extra support your body needs to promote a healthy immune system. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
Welcome to Sunshine Auto, the hardest place on the planet for a rims, pinch, and tires.
We are your auto superstore for rims, Lexani, Azaras, Trueform, Western, Lux, Fuel, Tracklight, Tough, Rough Racing, Velocity, Mud, All-Terrain, and low-profile tires. Cars, homes, and commercial window tinting. At Sunshine Auto, we put God first and customer is king.
Blessed love.
It's gotten harder and harder to get your daily requirement of vital nutrients from food alone. Without additional vitamin and nutrient support, your health and well-being can suffer drastically. That's why Z-Radical was specifically formulated. It combines a blend of antioxidant-rich vitamins, minerals, and botanicals with the protective powers of fucoidan to help fill the gap from lack of nutrients in your foods. The core of Z-Radical is fucoidan, a naturally occurring polysaccharide that helps stimulate immune reaction, protecting you against inflammation and oxidative stress. We harvest this powerful mineral-rich nutrient from brown seaweed, harvested only from the world's most pristine ocean waters to ensure the purest quality. It's then extracted using cold process technology to ensure maximum levels of bioavailability. Then we add essential vitamins that help to protect your cardiovascular and nervous systems and are crucial for optimal immune and neurological function. Z-Radical also includes a proprietary blend of delicious antioxidant-rich fruits and berries. This great-tasting combination helps your body combat free radical imbalances that can contribute to a variety of degenerative conditions like arthritis and heart disease. Z-Radical. Experience the power of fucoidan with antioxidant-rich berries, 8 essential vitamins, and more to provide you with potent health benefits. To learn more, contact your Longevity associate.
And welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm in your company. And today I am chatting with Robb Sawyer and C. Alan Johnson. We initially had planned to have Stone McEwan as a part of the conversation today, but unfortunately he was having some technical difficulties and wasn't able to stay on the line. And we are talking today about the price of sovereignty as we look at the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, the aggressor being Russia, Ukraine finding itself in a pickle. Particularly, I read today an article in the New York Times talking about how Ukraine did have I think a nuclear arsenal, and I think about 30 years ago signed an agreement that they gave them away because of an agreement that in part said that Russia would not become an aggressor. And now they are regretting that decision. So we're talking about trying to bring this home for us, not just in terms of the fallout that we're all already feeling, but the question of the real price of sovereignty, whether or not we are in a position where we would be able to be self-sustaining or protect ourselves from an aggressor should something similar happen to us. And prior to the break, I mentioned one of our Facebook viewers and the question that they had about us being able to be independent and rely on ourselves. And the question I asked the gentlemen who are part of the panel is whether or not that was a realistic view. So let's get your answers now. Gentlemen, do you think that she is living in a place of fantasy when it comes to talking about
not
us
so
being...
much. I would say not so much fantasy, but just aspirational. Classic
okay.
basic needs are food, clothing, and shelter. Modern
Mhm.
basic needs also includes energy, communications, and transportation. So all those 6 areas of concern, we don't deliver any of it ourselves. We depend on trade to acquire food, clothing, and shelter. We depend on trade to acquire energy, to acquire our means of transportation, to acquire our means of communications. So these 6 areas of basic needs, we are depending on the kindness of strangers or trading partners in order to acquire them, so we can live the comfortable life that we all aspire to. So aspirational. It would be nice if we can grow our own food, make our own clothes, build our own houses with our own building materials. It would be nice. And we should go from plan to actual, actually make some formidable business plans to try and do that. We should, we must, but we're not there yet.
But I would agree with Sawyer. Yes, here's the problem: possibilities and probabilities are two different things. And oftentimes I hear our leaders talk about, why don't we? Think about this and imagine this. Everybody says we could, we should, whatever. No one ever comes and said how. And yes, we have a tremendous amount of resources that could very well put us as one of the most economically powerful countries in the world. But just like those other countries around the world, United States and other things, that what do? They have the abundance of oil. What is the oil for them unless they can convert it or trade it in the open marketplace? What is the use of our so-called resources? We said we don't need anybody. This comes back to the so-called independence or so-called sovereignty. We don't need anybody. So let me ask you, how many things that we consume on a daily basis, when you look at the multiple resources that we could convert for self-sustainability? We don't produce cotton in the volume need for our clothes, our shoes, our automobiles, our building materials, our housing. Just look at our very existence and understand where the world itself, though they cry independence, has an interdependence type environment based on the global trade. We can now take some better positions as to what we have to leverage, because we have often heard leadership say we don't have anything to trade. That's where the untruth is. But there is no such thing as saying that you are going to create this cocoon because we have possibility of oil, we have aragonite, we have carbon credits, we have the traffic through our country, the traffic over our air, we have fisheries. You go through the whole list of things. We have my mind's running back on the list of them. It's about 30 or so of them. What do they mean for us? We have them in abundance. Okay, so you have a yard full of coconuts, and you says, good, because I have these coconuts, I am declaring myself an independent of the Bahamas. Okay, what you gonna do? Live off coconuts, wear coconuts, build with coconuts, do whatever with coconuts? It just doesn't work the way many of us imagine it to be. What I'm simply saying is that we have to put ourselves in a better positions at the negotiating table. Instead of being the meal at the table, we need to actually be one of the participants. And I am one who strongly believes, as being in technology 45 years and some other influences around the world, that if we are not invited to sit at the table rather than the meal, I believe that we're in a position right now in this global reset to build a table to invite others to sit at. And so that's where we can actually change the dynamics of this so-called imaginary thing that we have of sovereignty and this real existence of independence. We can. We have them in theory, but when you begin to break them down in the layers, you can see that possibilities and probabilities are two different things.
We have a caller on the line? No. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Johnson said global reset. Ooh, scary thought. I mean, I don't want to go there with him in terms of whether the last 2 years have been some kind of planned conspiracy. But I do like the idea that a crisis is a terrible thing to
opportunity.
We must not allow this crisis to go by. We must embrace any and every opportunity to make change and to keep the change.
But here's the thing, though, to that thought. Maybe there's some things that are going on that we are not privy to. But from where I sit, it doesn't seem that our leaders, and I'm not limiting this to any one particular political party, it doesn't seem that they are taking advantage of the opportunity that has presented itself with this, particularly talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been at this now 2 years, more than 2 years, and I dare say that we have not learned the lessons that we should have learned or implemented any realistic change based on that time that we've had to reset. I'm not convinced that we've done a good enough job at putting anything in place that is going to make us move any further along in our development as a result of the opportunity that would have presented itself through the pandemic. Am I wrong with that?
No doubt. There's a lot of truth to what you're saying there. I mean, a lot of things have been exposed, in terms of a lot of our deficiencies. But our leaders, even the two administrations, they have embraced some of the change. I mean, look now at how many of the schools are trying to do online learning. Wow. This is technology that's been around for 10, 15 years. Only now we are doing it. We should have been doing it all along. But even that, we will not go backwards.
But even that, Rob, how long is it going to take us to get something as simple as that right? I mean, it's just, we pat ourselves on the back for trying to get it. But come on, man.
We are good at redefining reality. That we are good at. So we'll do something that we've never done and then spend a tremendous amount of resources in media trying to convince people it is what it's not. And I would say to you, we have no digital information management system in the education system. What we have is a shanty town.
Oh, Lord.
That we have used words, and I've said this before, and I'll challenge the Ministry of Education, the Minister of Education, the government, anything, to prove. Just present the curriculum or the system that you say you're using. It does not exist. However, we are good at telling people and applauding because we don't want to fail at anything. So we'll applaud and say what we have done. The problem is that the things that the Bahamas needs are disruptive technology, innovation, and transformation. We're the only people who can actually begin to use Adobe PDF and say we have transformed government. We're the only people who begin to do online banking that's been around for 30 years and say how we are digitally transforming the environment when individuals, it's like, no matter what we do is we say, well, we could have done better. See, the problem we have in the Bahamas is because of the 200 nations or 202 nations, we constantly look for nations and we move this goalpost daily basis to compare how well we have done based on the failure of other countries. But success is how well you have done based on what you were capable of doing, not how well you have done based on the failure of others. And that's what our leadership have. But what happens is this change, and I put to you that our economic picture is going to call for some radical changes because we've been waiting for America to open her back door so that we could get some whatever is squirted towards us as our economic empowerment, and it's not been working. So what it's going to cause, because what happens is the changes that is needed requires a disruption of the status quo that we have been marketed to have possessed. It causes us to recognize that we are not independent and we are not sovereign. nor do we have control of our economic system or anything in the Bahamas except in some form of facade.
See, Alan, what are you talking about? Have you forgotten July 17th, 1973? Have you forgotten the lowering of the Union Jack and the raising of the Bahamian flag? Have you forgotten? What do you mean we're not independent?
I'm waiting for an explanation. See, you know, I don't want to sound condescending, right? One time I went to the flea market and I found a beautiful picture of a sunrise, and then I went to the art store, and they allowed me and worked with me, and I framed it. So now I'm a framer of the picture, okay, not the Constitution. See, we I'm saying the Constitution was given to us, okay? And for those of us who say our leadership wrote it, all we got to do is look at Jamaica and all the other countries and see the similarities. So it's amazing that in 1973, we wrote a Constitution that pre-existed and was used as a template for these other countries.
Oh, yeah, it was definitely a template. If you remember how the history went, there was this collection of men, was it 12, 15 of them, all men. They went to London, they were there for 3-4 months. They picked among the different templates of constitutions that the colonial office had, and then they picked
got
one
the
that
picture,
was closest,
came back and
they
framed
went
it.
and they went and they customized and made a few changes here, there, and the other. And that was the history. You know, of how our founding fathers didn't compose the Constitution from scratch. They took a template that was closest to what they wanted, and then they went forward there. Unfortunately, that collection of men was only men. There were no women. There were very few minorities and others represented within that group.
Quintero says 1964, 1969, and 1973 were an illusion.
Yeah, well, obviously she's thinking that independence is only words alone here. We are still very much a dependent state to all of these superpowers surrounding us.
No, I wouldn't say it was an illusion because something happened. It's more that we have adopted it as a delusion.
Interesting. All right, the telephone numbers to call 326-0271, 326-0271, 326-0272, 326-0272, or our WhatsApp number 824-9952, 824-9952. Now, every now and again, gentlemen, you hear talk of we should become a republic. We should become a republic. And if we look at our neighbor to the south, well, a bit removed neighbor to the south, Barbados, a lot of people are admiring the leadership of Mia Mottley, and she recently led that nation to become a republic. So they put their money where their mouth was and not just talk about breaking ties with Britain, but actually doing it. What are your thoughts on that? It keeps coming up every now and again, but are we realistically in a position to even have a conversation about becoming a republic, considering all of the shortcomings that our nation faces with basic things?
Absolutely. I think that should be more than aspirational. We should definitely have a roadmap to become a republic. I present that right at the death of Queen Elizabeth. Mind you, I'm not welcoming her death. I'm not looking for her to die or anything. She's been a fine sovereign for us, and long live the Queen. But whenever that time comes, that she does indeed pass on, I think we should kick into gear a roadmap to which to introduce a new constitution and consider becoming a republic. Because what's the alternative? That we now have to pay obeisance to her son, Prince Charles, as the new sovereign?
Yeah, right. It goes from Her Majesty to His Majesty, the King. Yeah. See, I agree with him, because what happens is we're approaching the 50th year, right? And so, but we're not having this type of conversations. And the question is where we are and where we want to be. And these actually comes into the conversation we're having today. Where do we really want in this so-called definition of sovereignty? And where do we want to place ourselves in this concept of independence or independent? And so what happens is your independence comes from your ability to also influence behavior that is beneficial to you, even for areas that you don't produce. But again, it requires almost like an equality. It requires leadership, the economic class as well as the political class, to forgive up where the position they holds. The problem is these classes of people that governs us, we call them the plutocrats and the oligarchs, they have never made a plan B except to continue the second phase of slavery by creating a plantation by which we go from birth to death in the work field, through our education system and otherwise. Because like, if you talk about hospitality and diversification of the economy, it requires now for behemoths to take ownership of the economy, the new DeFi and fintech and other things, and the reshaping of hospitality as well as tourism. Now remember that tourism is what people experience, hospitality is what people do, allows for behemoths to take ownership. But yet you see the previous administration went out looking for foreigners to do what we can do for ourselves, call ourselves independent, call ourselves sovereign. So you have the same administration still out there looking when money is knocking at our doors based by the decentralization of commerce, banking, financial services, and many of the industries. We're trying to find our niche in the old system to which we can reattach ourselves to, and that's where the problem is.
Well, Michelle, I would like to invite you or offer you to invite me again for another show that you have on economic diversity. But you did ask a question here about becoming a republic, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole as Mr. Johnson just did and changing it. But just to keep the subject strictly on becoming a republic, one thing I would want your audience to know is becoming a republic does not mean that we abandon our British heritage. We could continue to remain a part of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is just a club. It doesn't contribute anything to our well-being anyway. South Africa is a republic and part of the Commonwealth. Trinidad is a republic and part of the Commonwealth. Right there in Barbados, they've now become a republic and they are still part of the Commonwealth. So that status quo can indeed remain. We cannot change history. So we don't want to act as if we want to bury everything we've done with the British over the last 500 years. No, that should continue. But with a republic, we put in the governmental structure that allows us to be more responsive and more accountable to the needs of the people.
Does that mean, though, if we go in that direction, that in the event that we are faced with a bully, like Ukraine is being faced with right now, that we are on our own because we would have changed from a... Explain that, please.
You made that comment earlier, and I wanted to address it then. Thank you so much for bringing it up again. The Commonwealth doesn't contribute to our national security right now. There is no Commonwealth forces. What gives us the national security is NATO. And that's the US and Canada and 27 other countries in Europe. We have signed a security pact with the US, with the Caribbean Basin Security Pact, that allows us to call on the United States to provide defense in case there's this bully that comes along and threatens, our security. So it is not the Commonwealth that does that. No royal Navy ships are going to come down here and protect us against some bad guys. Mind you, the UK is part of NATO as well, so they will be part of the solution. But it is not the Commonwealth structure that provides homeland security for us. It is the North American Treaty Organization, NATO. So that gives us the US and Canada and the UK and the other 27 European nations.
See, my argument is that changing the republic without changing some very institutions by which we are allowed to have some sort of influence, just basically, it's like changing dress. You don't change locations. And so what I'm simply saying is, like Barbados. Barbados now must move into the discussion as to which structure they will be now that they've declared themselves to be a republic. There's been no major constitutional shift or any discussion yet.
I think they did that first. They had to change their constitution. They had to change their constitution to recognize a new head of state. For us to consider being a republic, we will have to change our constitution. And by God, we need to. We have a deficient version of Westminster right now. We have a Senate that, bless their heart, I'm sure the members of the Senate really love their country and want to serve their people, but they're just a rubber stamp. How many bills come out of Parliament that are initiated in the Senate? Anybody? Somebody? Come, please, tell me.
Actually, there's some laws that prohibit. There's some laws prohibit types of bills that can even come out of the Senate, even though they call themselves the upper superior house. And so again, we've bastardized this whole concept of parliamentary democracy that basically opens a window. And I'm simply saying is that even from our constitutional aspect of bastardizing 73 and 74, where we can't remove the prime minister, and some other small aspects. These are the things that our leaders, when we went for this so-called constitutional menu, basically bastardized some twists and turns for power. That, so essentially, we can do some things. We're just changing the name without some real structure. This is why when we have these so-called constitutional debates on these things, we have the same old minds who basically came and tried to massage a position, right, and say this is how it's going to be. In fact, the constitutional reform that the Progressive Labour Party brought for the gaming, where the law should have created the ability for people to bring constitutional referendums to it. What they've done, they've tried to preserve to say, we are the guardians of the Constitution, and we'll tell you how we're going to modify the Constitution in your best interest, and we'll spend millions of dollars trying to convince you that it is what we tell you as opposed to how it's read or how it's written. And so constitutional, which the Constitution made allocation for us to create laws to allow behemoths to bring constitutional referendum. We didn't create any law to give the people that power, where you could say if you get a certain amount of people who sign this or sign this, and these are the changes to this, whatever it is, it simply says we'll continue to hold the power. There is some real conversation when we talk about a republic or anything else that we have to have beyond just simply say changing the queen. We have to change the whole structure of governance.
That real conversation is called a constitutional convention. Please, somebody, anybody, everybody, let's get started with that process. And Mr. Johnson,
especially for the 50 anniversary.
So please, but whoever starts this constitutional convention, put Mr. Johnson on it. He's got a lot of good ideas. So we should, but we need to do this because you mentioned the Senate is just a rubberneck organization. The Governor General, just another rubberneck organization. The Queen, head of state, another rubberneck institution. So we have three rubber stamp, not rubberneck, my apologies. So we have three institutions that are all rubber stamped within our constitutional directives. That doesn't make any sense at all. We have to reboot. We don't need to just change and modify and amend here and there. We need a brand new constitution. We've needed it from the beginning. Those 12 to 15 men who did it in 1973, they were in a hurry. They had some bias. They had some idiosyncrasies. They embedded it in, but 50 years is far too long for a defective constitution. It's time for us to get it right, finally.
Absolutely.
Now, one of our challenges, though, is that in order to change our constitution, do we have to go to a referendum?
Yes.
Even more so. It requires a whole constitutional convention. In some countries around the world, they've actually elected representatives for the constitutional convention. So you actually will have a body that's actually elected that will represent the thoughts and expressions and aspirations of their constituents. And then that final document goes back to the people to be signed on.
Clearly,
that's never done in the past. We always needed it.
Exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. And that is the problem, that we have not taken the proper steps in the past to do this right. And allowed the process to become polluted to the point where it became a political football between two tribes. I'm going to vote against myself just because my tribe didn't bring this forward. And this is the kind of nonsense that we see happening in this country, and we wonder why we're not advancing. So what you guys are describing here today is exactly what is needed, so that when we do look at constitutional reform, it doesn't become some kind of sick game that's being played between two political parties.
But see, Michelle, when you look at the so-called referendi bill they brought, that's why they kept it in a controlled environment. They never brought a referendi bill or referendum bill to where people can initiate referendums. They kept it, because what happens is when you look at the Constitution gave them the opportunity to create the bill. And they then went and orchestrated this bill rather than opening it up to the public the way most developed countries have. They came with this controlled environment just to achieve a means to an end for what they have. And so this whole constitutional discussion or Congress or whatever we want to call it can begin right now with the Progressive Labour Party going and amending that bill, which will take 10 minutes, in a manner that allow constitutional referendum or any type of referendum to be born off the people rather than a select group who select people at the top. And so I believe, and I support Sawyer, I believe that starting in the morning, we should move to have a discussion on what's now, what's new, and what's next.
Good point to end on. We have to take a quick break. We have a caller coming in. I don't know if that's a call for the show, but you want to answer that quickly, or you want to go to the break? Okay, we're going to go to the break first, and then on the other side of the break, we are going to talk about what's now. How did you put that, C. Allen?
What's now, what's new, and what's next?
What's now, what's new, and what's next? What are some of the lessons that we should be learning from Ukraine as it relates to us in the Bahamas, us here in the Bahamas, and the question of sovereignty and independence? Stay with us. We'll have more after these words from our sponsors. You are listening to GPS on Global 99.5 FM.
Follow us on all social media.
And we are back. Welcome back to GPS Global Paradigm Shift on Global 99.5 FM. Michelle Malcolm in your company, and our guests today are C. Allen Johnson and Robb Sawyer. We are talking about the price of sovereignty as we look at what is taking place on the other side of the world, where Russia has become an aggressor and has been on the attack against Ukraine, and it is raising the question of sovereignty. What is the real price of sovereignty? Are we here in the Bahamas, a small state, truly independent? Can we really defend ourselves against outside forces should any of them decide to become aggressors against us? And unlike the Ukraine, does our geography serve as a form of protection for us? We have a caller on the line, so we're going to answer those questions and more on the other side. But first, let's go to the phone lines. Caller, welcome to GPS.
Good day. Yes, Mrs. Malcolm.
How you doing?
Okay, I called earlier. I was the guy that talked about the salt water.
Uh-huh.
I was tuning in again. I heard
Correct.
you all was referencing the Constitution and what is required for change in XYZ, right? Before you go on the break.
Right.
Okay, now, again, as a young man, I got into politics at 39. I ran twice. And I ran as independent solely because of what history of my country, from what my interpretation was, taught me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, it was fortunate that I was able to get my hands on a document called the Bahamas Independent Act 1973. Have you ever read that?
I have.
Yes,
not.
Okay, I need to let you read that document. And so what you would see that what you're asking for has already been answered in that document. Because apparently the document was probably the document that was received on 1973 by Finland from the British or the Europeans when they gave us our independence.
Mm-hmm.
But what Finland failed to do was teach us or even disclose this document to our nation. Now, persons in the nation have the document because I got it from someone who is a Bahamian.
Mm-hmm.
But it's unfortunate that due to many years of oppression and victimization, which you do receive when you go against the both parties, because as an independent, a young man, and I decided to become an independent, politics is so ingrained in our culture that politics sometimes trump family and values and principles. I'm a young man. I declared $60 as my profit, net profit based on my income. I have no assets. During the declaration, I raised some questions based on persons declared, like persons, for example, Alcides. If you remember Alcides' declaration, he was actually a person with deficit income because his mortgage, based on his declaration, was exceeded his income at the time before he became a senator and now a minister of economics and now being paid substantial enough to cover his debt. But before he got back into power, Alcides, even though he had high assets, which was claimed and was mortgaged, his income was insufficient. So he was not even making a profit every month from whatever he was doing according to his expenses and his income. We find that we elect persons like these people to run us and to then make decisions regarding finances. Okay? I'm also a businessman and a tradesman.
Kareem, not to interrupt you, but you're dragging us away from the actual topic and concerning even the Constitution.
Well, the Constitution is simple as if you read that document. That's why I can't even talk about it, because if you read that document about independence, you realize that we as a country, from pending time, we're supposed to create our own constitution to govern our own people who are now free from the plantation of colonial democratic system. We were supposed to implement an independent democratic system favored for the Bahamian people and no longer using oligarch or European laws to govern us as an independent nation.
Okay, you made your point.
Kareem, but I just want to let Kareem know. Kareem, the document you speak of is not a secret document. It's available on Google. It's the independence.
How come we still trying to figure out how do we create a constitution change in an independent environment, sir?
But the independent document and the Constitution itself, the independence order was nothing more than some precluding things that are justified when the transition happens, what happens. But even the document we now refer to as the Constitution gives us the step. But there is some things that you saw, spoken law and unspoken common law, that some steps that we can take. The problem is that the fact that you allowed individuals to tell you what you can do and never read these documents yourself didn't preclude the fact that these things existed and exist today. So now that we are now informed and Google have empowered us in the last 15 years, it simply is, now that we know, what will we do? But saying what somebody didn't do and couldn't do, might have, shouldn't do, doesn't work. I'm simply saying this, like Sawyer said, we are here now today. What's now? Let's have a discussion on what's next and what's new. And so what I'm simply saying is, we're here, let's make the decision that we need to demand, agitate, advocate, whatever it is that's necessary for what happens, and stop talking about the nail and get up off of it.
But that's why I pay $400, Mr. C. Allen Johnson, to show the people, no matter my financial status, I am still capable to put myself in a position intellectually to provide substantial knowledge to help a country forward.
Kareem, I want to thank you for calling, but I don't want us to get off topic, okay?
Okay, boss lady.
All right, and Kareem, Kareem is late. I say, Kareem, a good person for you to go and model is Barack Obama. Become a community organizer and capture that community that you are seeking to do. And if each of us do that in our community, we could come back on the battle table. And if 20 of us come together as independents and otherwise, we will be happy. We will definitely bring about the change needed.
Let's get back on track. What are some of the lessons that we should be learning from the Ukraine-Russia situation?
Well, I would think classic bullying. How do you deal with a bully? You cannot just stick your head in the sand and hope that he will go away or pray him away. You need to be prepared. You need to be on guard for the threats of bullying. Well, as anyone will tell you, bullies in school, and bullies in the community, bullies in the neighborhood, they only answer to a higher authority. So even though you may consider yourself independent and have the autonomy to make your own decisions, you're going to have to align with some other people to get help in dealing with the bully.
Well, here's the
That's
thing.
reality.
If we use the schoolyard analogy, talking about the bully, right? And obviously bullies don't pick on kids that are bigger than them. So they're looking for the scrawny kid that they think that they can control.
Yes.
The scrawny kid realizes that they can't beat them physically. So the smart, scrawny kid figures out a way to either endear that bully to them or provide some kind of service to do something to
or align with somebody else
or align
has
with
the bully
someone
afraid.
else, but change that whole dynamic.
Come on,
So that the
Michelle.
bully.
We are too close to the U.S. We have read and we have lamented, we have cried over far too many times people going and grabbing a gun and going in schools and taking out on their bullies. So we know the reality of how people deal with bullies, and
Right.
it's not always a pretty picture.
Right.
Unfortunately, here we don't have the same bad gun control laws and rules and rights and privileges that the United States have, so we got a better handle on that. But the threat of a classic bully is still there.
But my point is, as the scrawny kid, we got to figure out how to protect ourselves without having access to what you're talking about right now. My point is, we have to start to think smart. Because that's what a scrawny kid has to do in order to survive the bullying. Are we thinking smart?
No, we're not. See, what happens is you could leverage the force. See, a bully actually works with threats as opposed to actual action. And so the difference is that even when the question is when that threat becomes action, how do you leverage that? You know, in kung fu and judo and other different things, you're taught that you don't necessarily meet force with equal force unless you can provide a greater force. You would only just neutralize it, just making it the one and the same. Is how do you use the force that's being pulled against you to step aside and cause that force to be used as a negative against the person. This is where foreign policy, this is where thinking, this is understanding where you are, understanding who you are, and the potential of who you can be comes into play. That you have to know what it is you have to leverage. We don't know because we have a leadership who has told us for our very entire existence that you have nothing except your labor. So essentially what the master did was one time we had a colonial master that was responsible for providing our food, our shelter, our protection, everything else. And we used to just go to work and they used to take everything from us. Now what they did is they said, tell you what, we're gonna let you pay for your own labor, pay for your own shelter, pay for your own food, pay for all these different things, but you still work for us. And so that's the problem. The key word here is taking ownership of who we are and who we can be. And these discussions about whether it be resources, intellectual, tangible, or intangible, because I always tell people is that we have natural resources and other resources. It's tangible, intangible, seen, and unseen. And until we begin to actually be able to catalog and categorize those things to find out the strengths, weaknesses, threats, and the pastel, the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and ecological impact, we are simply just going to be sitting saying, they didn't do this, we weren't allowed to, the big guys will. But we seem to be, and that's just, and say, Michelle, like I told us the story 1 or 2 times. But Dad told a story of a man sitting on the porch, the dog was sitting screaming, no, no, no. So one day they asked the man on the porch, why is that dog screaming? He says, oh, he's sitting on a nail. Everybody says, why don't you get him off the nail? The old man says, when he gets tired of the pain, he gets up himself. We have yet to get tired of the pain to get up off the nail.
Okay, so you went into the last break with what's now, what's new, and what's next. What's next?
Let's get that roadmap ready.
As I said, what Sawyer recommended.
Yeah, last week we were informed that our dear sovereign, Queen Elizabeth, is suffering from COVID, and we hope that she recovers and she's well. But we need to be prepared. We need to have that roadmap ready, kind of like one of those signs that says, break glass in case of emergency. We have to be prepared to break glass. We need to have the roadmap ready to go and start a constitutional convention so that we could formulate a brand new constitution for the 21st century Bahamas. The one we had previously barely worked for the 20th century. Definitely cannot work for the 21st.
And so again, one of the greatest things we have is the so-called constitutional privacy and constitutional sovereignty. That's one thing. Those are individuals that we have. We have constitutional privacy and constitutional sovereignty. It doesn't exist in any other constitution around the world. When conveyed digitally, that is a powerful tool. You can literally have half of the world seek citizenship in the Bahamas by virtue of us digitally without ever coming here. And so when we begin to look at the strengths of the Constitution, we have to move to protect them. For me, the Constitutional Convention does the same thing. It simply says that by the time they finish mourning the Queen and signing in the new king, we should have he should know that we'll be sending our final condolences, our final congratulations, and we are transitioning. And so the conversation as we move into the 50th year, long live the Queen, but inevitably she will die. And so the question is, as we move our 50th year, are we ready as adults, 50-year-old adults that still want to depend on mama to take care of them on what ideology that she does, no independent thinking? Let's have a conversation, more so that 70% of the population now is born post-1973.
But in all fairness, though, C. Allen, 50 is not, that's still fairly young when you're talking nation.
Yeah, that is true. But for any 50-year-old, and I'm sure it's happened to you, Michelle, I'm sure it's happened to you, Mr. Johnson, when you get to this age, what do the lawyers always tell us to do? Prepare a will. Just to be prepared, because it creates chaos if there is no will and something happens to us in those next days, weeks, months, years, that goes down. So we are saying it's time now to prepare a will for Queen Elizabeth.
Right, a blueprint, you see? Right, Michelle, we talk about these National Development Plan. I've said many times, and I've challenged those who brought them. These are a book of ideas. There's no strategy of implementation, how, what, when, why, who would ever do it. There's nothing. It's like, we could do this, we should do this, we did whatever with everything else. I'm simply saying is, now when we say we want to now move into this independent, we want to develop this sense of sovereignty, then let's actually have strategies implementable and adjustable. China has a 5-year strategy. Every new year in China, they have a 5-year strategy. People have to ask, what happened to the last 5-year strategy? The 1 year has passed. You don't need a strategy for a year that's already been passed. So you have a 5-year strategy. They have tied into a 100-year+ strategy. But we have shelves and shelves of book of ideas that we call plans. Nothing you could take from the economic plan and take it now and go build a house. It can't. So it's not a plan. These are books of ideas. So I'm simply saying is we actually need some plans, some strategies, some execution, things that we can move towards developing. But the first thing is recognizing where do we want to be as sovereign, where do we want to be as independent, and where do we want to be as interdependent from a global perspective. Then we begin to look at strengths, our weakness, opportunities, and threats. And so then we begin to really have planning. And so, because what we have is these small group of, if you take the last 30 years of economic planning, of what we call national planning, economic recovery committee, the new ones being formed, and simply combine them all in together, you'll be surprised that you may have a few new people when you take even the ones who have been dead and the ones who have been added, rehashing the same thing, trying to represent the same ideology they've been married to, ignoring 27 years of the digital revolution, ignoring the third technology revolution, ignoring the fourth industrial revolution we're in, ignoring all of the realities that we're in. We just need to get real. We ourselves as a people need to get real in who we are and stop this charade game we play of pretending, dressing up like the guy that puts on a briefcase, dress up every day, briefcase, goes downtown and sits on the bus stop and then come back home.
But what does that mean? What does that mean for us to face the reality of who we are? What does that mean exactly? It sounds really good, but in practical terms, when you're talking about defining our national identity, what does that entail? What will it take for us to get that done?
It's a conversation.
Right. If I can, because I
go ahead, Rob.
Mention real quick, playbook. It sounds like we absolutely need to have our playbooks ready. It's one of the criticisms I had launched towards the Bahamas 2 years ago when the COVID-19 first happened, that we didn't seem to have a playbook. We didn't know what we were going to do, how we were going to do, when we were going to do. If you folks recall, back in April, May, 2020, how there's, the airports were closed, the country was shut down, no one could get in. It's like there was a virus pandemic happened, and we didn't know what we wanted to do. I mean, personally, I was stuck out of the country for 2 months. I couldn't come home. I was on the first flight that came in on May 8th, 2020. So I was actually directly affected. So we had no playbook, even though in 2003, when SARS happened in Hong Kong, the international community warned us and prepared us, get a playbook just in case it happens again. We all during the 2000s, we saw H1N1. Then during the teens, we saw Ebola and all the other viruses happen, pandemics and epidemics happen, and yet we still had no playbook at all. So how about the next crisis? Do we have a playbook for the next crisis? Do we have a playbook right now in case a bully steps up right now and threatens us the way Russia is threatening Ukraine? Do we have a playbook in case there's another Category 5 hurricane happens this summer? One of your callers said that they predict that this year is going to be really bad. Do we have a playbook to make sure that we don't have the same response that we had to Dorian if it happens again this year? We can't sit back and just pray and hope that things will be better. No, we have to prepare for the worst. At least have a playbook, break glass in the case of emergency, so we will know what to do, when to do, and then make adapt and change adjustments along the way.
Mm-hmm. See, Alan, you started to say something.
And Sawyer is absolutely, I'm saying Sawyer is absolutely correct in that. Let's use our food security, food sovereignty we talk about. We don't even know what food security is as versus food sovereignty. We said we're going to BAMSI, because you know what? We grow bananas and squash and papayas and green peppers and thyme, and you go, is that where we're going to now say if our total food supply shuts off for the next 6 months next year, BAMSI will feed us? Do we really have a fishing strategy for the protein of the sea? No one, you will hear ministers talk. No one can point you to a food security strategy. No one can point you to a health strategy in spite of 2 years of this so-called epidemic, because we had a broken system before the epidemic reached. No one can tell you, in spite of exactly what is happening with our education system, that they are working on a strategy. They've been convincing us that they have something that doesn't work that is actually working. They, at the same time, they said this system is working excellently, but 50% of the students didn't show up. Okay, what do we do now? And so we need playbooks for almost every aspect of our society that gauges where we are, where we want to be. And it has to come out of the people as opposed to the political class. For some reason, we believe that individual 5-year celebrities that we elect every 5 years begin to have the intellectual capacity that exceed the intelligence of all of us by the few of them. And then after they lose it, we begin to see that who they really were for those 5 years. And so what we need is a return of power to the people. And so we have basically become pacified to such a way that we look every 5 years, we'll collect a mom or dad who will take care of our needs while we just sit around. That has to be broken. The men say we've been bending, those things now have to be broken. And nothing like the present is never in history again. We'll probably see this alignment of everything probably for a few hundred years for the Bahamas to redefine itself using playbooks for every small aspect of us and bring it together as a master plan.
Well, gentlemen, I really hope that what you both agreed with in terms of the constitutional reform and what it's going to take to make that happen. I really do hope that the powers that be are listening to this conversation and are willing to do what really needs to be done to make this happen. Because, I know that we as a country are very, polarized when it comes to politics. We are suffering from a deep degree of tribalism. But we have to get to the place where we accept the fact and reality that unless we come together, regardless of party colors, and truly do put in place the necessary, take the necessary steps to advance this nation, We are going to continue to be vulnerable to the bullies out there. We're going to continue to be vulnerable to the suitors out there who may or may not be coming with good intentions, because the fella could come and court you, but the parent always asks, "What's your intentions towards my daughter?" So we have to be, I think, aware that we have to always have our eyes open, whether it be for the suitor that doesn't have good intentions or the bully. We can't sit back and continue to be reactive as opposed to proactive. We just do not have that luxury anymore. And my hope and desire is that we finally find a group of people, which may include ourselves in some capacity, who are willing to do the work and make the changes that need to be made in order for us to advance this country. We can't afford to continue to go down this road of do nothing until something happens, always being caught with our pants down. We just don't have that luxury anymore. I'm going to give you guys, we got 4 minutes left in the show, so let's give each of you 1 minute to wrap this up from your perspective and give us your final thoughts. And Cialan, I'm going to start with you.
I would say to the Bahamas that we have a unique opportunity ahead of us to actually redefine who we are and who we will become. The power of the people is and shall always be greater than the people and the people in power. We have the power. We give them the authority to act on behalf of us. We never surrender our power. They've convinced us that we do for 5 years. And so what we have to do as a people, we have to decide, and I think the economic crisis, the social crisis, and the political crisis that's going to face our nation in the coming months will actually give us the opportunity to become responsive rather than reactive. Reaction requires no thought, a response do. And I'm asking Bahamians to begin to abandon the political patronage that we have and act as a nation, because it says that when you are not preparing, the world is. And when they meet you, they will beat you. And so this is the opportunity for us to come on equal grounds and begin to have the collective intelligence from the bottom up to where governance is meant to be, and begin to demand the change that we want, constituency by constituency, rather than knocking at the barn door and somebody keeps screaming over in this moment. This is the opportunity to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Rob, your thoughts.
I'll wrap up in 15 seconds since you took a lot of my time.
No, you still have
one
a minute.
One of my favorite expressions is that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We have definitely had to endure a crisis these last 2 years, and there will be more crises to come. So may we not just sit still and hope and pray and wish for the better days to come again. May we use these crises so as to forge change in our society. We must reform. We must transform. That is the only way we're going to have any future whatsoever. So, yes, we can do this. We can be successful. We can make the Bahamas a better place to live, work, and play. Let's do it.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation today. Listen, no matter where you fall on the side of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, I want to encourage you to pray for the people of Ukraine. The war is never the answer. There's got to be a better way. And let's hope that the talks that began this week will develop into something that can bring about peace. Remember, we too need to be concerned about our sovereignty and do whatever it takes to protect ourselves as a nation. And so thank you to our gentlemen, to both gentlemen who were here today. That's it. My time is gone. I'm Michelle Malcolm. Tomorrow is Wellness Wednesday, and I want to encourage you to make sure that you're part of the conversation tomorrow to learn how to protect your health. That's it for today. Thanks so much for being a part of the show, and have a great afternoon.
Global 99.5 FM reminds our listeners that the views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the host and guests and not necessarily the opinions of the owners of Global Communications Network and the operators of this radio station.
This is 99.5 Global FM, your number one source for R&B in the